We interrupt your regularly scheduled rant about druid shapeshifting to bring you this special announcement. Hey everybody, welcome back to RPG Imagining. So if you're following the social media verse for TTRPGs, you've probably seen that everybody is flipping out right now over the trailer for the Dungeons and Dragons movie, and it just reminded me of a common issue that we have in the hobby with regards to how people's memories of how games work compared to how they speak about their games. And there is frequently a misalignment in terms of how people talk about their games and what they purport to be common within the actual gaming literature. And so I've deliberately pulled some examples today of older hobby stuff. Okay, here's B2 Keep on the Borderlands, okay, one of the first basic adventures for Dungeons & Dragons. And I would like to compare some of these early sources to what a lot of people tend to say on social media about the hobby. And a lot of the disagreements that we have in the hobby, in my experience, have revolved around people claiming that the games work a certain way, and people pointing out that it's never worked that way. Okay, so I'm not intending this to be a hit piece or anything. My goal of it is just to show you in black and white what the original supplement said, so that we can dispel this misconception that people have about what the nature of the hobby has been. Now, that being said, 2 points that I want to make before we get started. Number one, your experience is whatever your experience has been. Okay? If you say to me that your experience in role-playing has been a certain thing, I believe you. Okay? Everybody does their hobby gaming within their own little sphere of their friends or people who go to their FLGS or whatever their circumstances are, okay? So if you have an experience that is different from what I present to you in these classic modules of Dungeons & Dragons, that's kind of the whole point. You're getting the point if you get that, okay? But people having different experiences does not, in of itself, validate or invalidate ideas. Okay, and that's why some of us who've been in the hobby for a long time fall very much on the Greg Stafford side of your game will vary, is what has always been a part of the hobby, whether you agree with that or not. Okay. Second thing that I want to point out here is that even though I have only pulled examples from older tabletop role-playing literature, I promise you that you can find examples like this in every single year that the hobby has been going on. Okay. So, from the early days, 1974, okay, we're approaching like the 50-year anniversary of the publication of Dungeons and Dragons. There have been people who've been playing all that time. And I promise you that they can all cite examples in every single year since 1974 where you read similar things to what we're going to read here in these modules that I'm going to point out right here. You'll notice that these are, several of these are POD copies, okay? Because, yes, I intend to keep on the Borderlands as POD because I really enjoyed reading it in printed format from PDF. But, everybody's got their own decisions about how they spend their funds, right? So B2 was published in 1980, okay? In this iteration, anyway. So the history of B2 is that it replaced, correct me if I'm wrong, B1 in the Dungeons & Dragons basic set. So the basic set had a wide variety of different boxes, and in the variants of the basic box that had an adventure, Keep on the Borderlands eventually replaced B1, which is the original basic scenario. So, published in 1980, page 2, second column. I'm going to skip down here to surrounding. Okay, this was written by Gary Gygax, by the way. I'm not a huge Gary Gygax fan, but I also know that there are many people in the hobby who worship the guy. Okay, and who knows, maybe that's going to sway your interpretation of some of these things. These are Gary Gygax's words. Okay, surrounding these strongholds are lands which may be hostile to the bold adventurers. Perhaps there are areas of wilderness filled with dangerous creatures, or maybe the neighboring area is a land where chaos and evil rule. For wilderness adventures, see Dungeons and Dragons expert set. Okay, that's I think a lot of what confuses a lot of people. Basic was mostly focused on setting up characters and doing dungeoneering, and experts sort of added this extra layer of going out into the world and exploring and interacting more from a story standpoint. Because remember, Gary Gygax was largely a miniatures wargamer. Okay, he was far more interested in the miniatures side of things than he was the role-playing side of things. There are natural obstacles to consider, such as mountains, marshes, deserts, and seas. There can also be magical barriers, protections, and portals. Anything you can imagine could be a part of your world if you so desire. Gosh, it's almost like, hold on a second, it's almost like the inventor of the game said that it's okay for you to imagine things and make it happen. Isn't this interesting? The challenge of your imagination, is to make a world which will bring the ultimate in fabulous and fantastic adventure to your players, a world which they may believe in. You know, I don't write scripts for films, but if I were to write a script for a film, knowing that it was involved with the studio system, I know that I would have to sell that film in some way, shape, or form to a boardroom full of executives. And in order to sell that film to a boardroom full of executives, I would probably, need to maybe pull all the stops out of my imagination to do something really cool to sell the film. That's just like a reality of the film industry, but don't take my word for it. This is Gary Gygax explaining this sort of creative freedom someone has in their game. So right off the bat, we have one example here of a writer of an early game supplement explaining to us that we should feel free to use our imagination and do whatever we think is cool. Okay. Maybe this will change in other examples. Hey, look at this. Famous supplement. You better believe I don't have a hard copy of this one. Okay. So Deities and Demigods happened in several releases. The first release included Elric of Melniboné mythos stuff, as well as the Cthulhu mythos. And they published the first iteration, and Chaosium had the rights to the Cthulhu mythos, a lot of what they included in this supplement. And so as a compromise, Chaosium just asked that they put a little disclaimer, which, let's see if we can find the disclaimer. Here it is. Special thanks are also given to Chaosium Incorporated for permission to use the material found in the Cthulhu mythos and the Melnibonian mythos. Now, I just purchased recently this copy off of DriveThru, and this version of Deities and Demigods does not contain any of that information because TSR ultimately, even though Chaosium told them it was okay if they just put the little blurb in there, they just ended up pulling Elric and the Cthulhu mythos out of Deities and Demigods. Okay, and it kind of makes sense. You make a compromise, but then by letter of the law, you don't want to get sued either, So here we have Deities and Demigods, a very well-known supplement for Advanced D&D. Advanced D&D, this was published in 1980, so same time as B2 was published in the basic box set. There was a time during the late 70s and a little bit into the early 80s in which TSR was simultaneously juggling basic, expert, and advanced all at the same time. Okay. Here's the preface by Jim Ward. Jim Ward is also very well known for Metamorphosis Alpha and Gamma World. And Jim Ward was the principal author of Deities and Demigods. And some of Jim's more recent work has been the re-release of the Starship Warden for Metamorphosis Alpha. And I backed that Kickstarter. Amazing book, huge book. We count 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs down. I'm going to read this paragraph for you. This is a supplement that came out in 1980. Okay, very famous supplement. While Deities and Demigods is ideally suited to the task of working deities into an AD&D campaign format, everything has not been covered in this book. In the 6,000-year-plus span of this work, mankind has spent a lot of that time adding to the myths dealt with herein. We did not try to encompass everything, and it is silly to assume that the 5 years or so of research that created deities and demigods could suffice. There are areas that were stressed because they were useful to DMs, whereas others were left out for the very same reason. The book should be used as a beginning framework for the DM. Sample it, take what is wanted, and start the gods as well as the players in a universe. While Deities and Demigods reveals a great many divine powers and a great many powerful devices, it is the duty of the DM to add, to change, and otherwise modify the information on these pages for use in a campaign. That's odd. I thought this one might be different, but it's basically making the same argument as Keep on the Borderlands did. How strange. It's almost as like from the inception of this game early on, they encouraged you to change stuff and do whatever you wanted. Amazing. I don't know what to say. I've been told over and over again on Twitter that people say that you can't change things in the games. And now, in reading the actual supplements from the past, it encourages you to. I don't know how to process this. Hey, N1 for advanced D&D game Against the Cult of the Reptile God, Douglas Niles. This was published in 1982. Here's my POD copy of it. Okay, I really would recommend that you check out Against the Cult of the Reptile God. From the perspective of advanced Dungeons and Dragons, like interacting with the town, having a little bit deeper of a story, and having to like work your way through a town that has enemies, that has allies. This is the kind of role playing that I like to do. That there needs to be more for me than just going in and smashing a bunch of creatures up. Okay. Oh my gosh, we don't even get past page 2. And I found a passage that supports the concept that changing stuff in supplements has been around since the beginning. In the introduction, the Dungeon Master should read the module carefully before running it for the players. Study the maps while reading the area keys in the module booklet. Important encounters are indicated by the numbers on the maps. These match the numbers given in the area keys. The area keys have boxed information that may be read aloud to the players. Unboxed information is for the DM to use to guide the characters through the adventure. The DM decides how much of the DM information the players may learn. The DM can add or change the given information as desired to increase the enjoyment of the players. Adding descriptions of room dimensions, smells, temperatures, the physical features, clothing, equipment of NPCs, non-player characters, and so on. You know, if you haven't read much basic, okay, or advanced Dungeons and Dragons from the early 80s or late 70s, it was very common to not necessarily have identically statted individuals. In fact, I would argue that right now, even in 5th edition, the game is still providing you with ranges for hit points. Okay, the hit point number, correct me if I'm wrong, given in the monster manual is an average. And you can feel free to have creatures with less hit points than that, with more hit points for that, based upon the type. You know, one thing that a fun tip from my perspective as a game master that might be useful to people in the audience is that, you know, maybe you decide Is the group of foes that the players are encountering, are they average? Are they below average? Are they above average? And then throw a mixture in there. And maybe you decide that this time around a majority of the creatures are higher than average hit points. And this time around, these are diseased or something. They have a sickness and they have lower than average hit points. The point being is that here, once again, in N1 against the Cult of the Reptile God, it's recommending that the DM add or change anything that they need to do. I want people to want to enjoy the hobby. Part of me doesn't care whether the Dungeons and Dragons movie is successful or not, so long as it gives people a taste of what is possible. And I'm telling you right now that if you want your druids to shift into owlbears, you just go ahead and you let them do it. It's your game. You can do whatever you want. If a player or group of players doesn't want to play that way, that's fine, because communication needs to be an important aspect of working at the table as well. I feel compelled to make this video because there's just... Folks, I don't know who hurt you, but you can't keep taking out your hurt on other people over trivial things. It doesn't matter that your fictional fairy dragonland sword fighty game works differently at a gaming table than it does in a Hollywood movie that is bankrolled and verified by a board of executives. It doesn't matter. Had the druid character turned into a fox, it would have been raw accurate, but it would not have been as cool as her turning into an owlbear. So yeah, that's all I have to say today. I just wanted to throw out there that it is completely false that altering the rules of the game is not a part of the game. People keep saying it over and over and over again. It has never been true. It's right here for you in black and white. And if you prefer to play rules as written in the book, I support you. Can you please just stop hating on people that prioritize their imagination and change first? Because it does not help the hobby at all. We should be encouraging each other. I'm encouraging you to play however you want to play, but I'm also encouraging you to make peace with the fact that not everybody plays the same way as you do, and that's okay. Awesome. I've been having a blast reading these early supplements. Many of them are at really affordable prices on DriveThru, so do go check that out. You know, I think that the PDFs for original basic adventures are $4.99, and they might even be cheaper now on the Christmas in July sale, which I think is still going on. So go check some of these out, if only to see for yourself, be able to compare how scenario design was done differently in the past compared to how it's done now. And also you'll be able to see some similarities about the good parts that have been kept from past scenarios. I think, and I've said this many times, Mike Mason of Chaosium has said it best, and that is that role-playing game scenario design is technical writing. And part of the rules of this technical writing is that you are writing essentially like a car manual, but instead of the manual telling you how to reconstruct the carburetor in a car, the manual is instructing you on how to read an adventure. And you can learn a lot about the technical writing nature of this and how it has evolved over time by studying these old adventures and comparing them to the new adventures. So that's a fun thing that you can do if you choose to do. I would recommend it if you are interested in role-playing history. It's a fun aspect of the hobby. Many people like to build characters just to build characters. Many people, myself included, like to study old supplements because we are interested in this evolution of the writing style and what has worked and what hasn't worked and what has changed and what hasn't changed. So there you go. Anywho, thanks everybody for watching. Have a great day. Let people like what they like.